Good morning. Thank you guys so much for worshiping with us this morning as we get to celebrate communion together as a family. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you. Revo Church has been able to meet needs all across our city, and that's because of generosity of people like you. We've been able to give masks to people that don't have any. We've been able to fill shelves in food banks across our city. We've even been able to provide counseling services for people that are facing the mental and emotional toll that's so prevalent in our society right now. Even our ability to have services and content online every week is made possible by your generosity. So thank you. Thank you for the people in our city that have a meal to eat today. Thank you for the people in our city that have pre-existing conditions or the elderly that now have masks to wear. Thank you for the people that are accessing our online content and are encouraged by the hope of Jesus. As a staff team, it is our honor and privilege. We are humbled to partner with you guys as we spark a revolution of life change through Jesus. And we don't just want to meet the physical needs. We also want to stay connected to our family spiritually. One of the ways that we do that is by prayer. And so would you do me a favor? We would love to pray for you. Would you guys send us an email at prayer@discoverrevo.com? We have a team right now that is ready to receive your prayer requests. It doesn't matter how big or how small the request is. We would love to go to our big God and ask big things for our people. And as I mentioned before, we're celebrating communion today. And I want to give you a chance right now to get your supplies together. You may not be prepared with all the supplies that you have, the traditional ones like grape juice or crackers, and that's okay. Even if you have to do this with water and sandwich bread, that's perfect. See, the power is not in the items, but in what they represent. The power is in looking and remembering what Jesus has done for you and he's done for me. So let's worship now. Let's sing together. Let's open up God's words together. And let's celebrate communion and the great things that Jesus has done for us.
Darkness, you will lead us. Good morning, church. Thank you so much for tuning in for our communion worship experience. Communion is a beautiful time of reflection and remembrance for us as we remember the completed work of Jesus as he went and died for all of our sins on the cross. Though death thought that it had won on Good Friday, Resurrection Sunday was coming. And Jesus went knowing that he was bearing the sins of the world, conquering death, and then giving us life eternal. In Luke 24, it tells the story of the resurrection. And as the women approach the tomb, they're asked one of the most amazing questions. In verses 5 and 6, it says, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen." And in that moment, the resurrection was announced to the whole world. Today, we have the opportunity to seek Jesus as well, not among the dead, but among the living. And he lives at the right hand of our Lord and in our hearts today. What a beautiful opportunity to approach his throne with confidence, to bow at his feet, to remember his sacrifice, and to give King Jesus the praise that he's due. I invite you today to prepare your hearts as we sing praises to the King. There was a moment when the lights went out, when death had claimed its victory. The King of love had given up his life. The darkest day in history. There on a cross they made for sinners. For every curse his blood atoned. One final breath and it was finished. But not the end we could have known. For the earth began to shake, and the veil was torn. What sacrifice was made as the heavens roared? All hail King Jesus. Lost, he crossed eternity. The King of life was on the move. For in a dark cold tomb, where our Lord was laid, one miraculous breath This is my Savior's blood. The beauty of heaven wrapped in my shame. The image of love upon death's frame. If having my heart was worth the pain, joy could you see beyond the grave? If love found my soul dying for, how wonderful, how glorious, my Savior's skies, victorious. My chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life and grace to grace. If heaven now owns that vacant tomb, how great is the hope that lives in you. The passion that tore through hell like a rose, the promise that rolled back death and its stone. Freedom is worth the life you raised. Then where is my sin and where is my shame? My Jesus, if love gave it all to have my heart, how wonderful, how glorious, my Savior's scars, victorious. My chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life and grace to grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. And from death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. And from death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. From death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. And from death to my Savior's scars, victorious. My chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life and grace to grace.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We are going to get to celebrate communion together. And I know it's odd that those two words even go together. How do you celebrate communion? Because communion is actually the observance of one of the darkest and most difficult 3 days of Jesus' life here on earth, maybe some of the darkest days in the history of humanity. How can you say we want to celebrate communion? Communion marks the death of an innocent man. And if you don't think that the death of an innocent man is an outcry and deserves outrage, then you haven't been listening to the news very much lately. All over the country, there have been protests over the past few weeks and demands for justice because in Georgia, an innocent man lost his life. Anytime an innocent person loses their life, it's newsworthy, but when an innocent man loses his life for the sake of others, that takes it to another level. And so it's interesting that when followers of Jesus talk about the moment that Jesus foretold when he would lose his life, that we call it a celebration, that we actually have a desire to even remember that. But that's what we're doing today, celebrating together. On the night before his death, the night that would change human history forever, Jesus sat down and told a powerful story and used great imagery around the dining room table with some of his closest followers and friends to help them know what they were getting ready to see, to prepare them for the difficulty that Jesus would actually go through over the next few days. He wanted to tell them ahead of time. That form of communication for Jesus was actually pretty common. He would oftentimes in his teaching tell his followers what they should expect if they would make the decision to follow him. See, Jesus didn't want anybody to be caught off guard. He didn't want to pull any punches. He wanted everyone to be prepared when they made the decision that they were going to follow Jesus. He knew that difficulty would come. He knew that they would face hardships in life. In fact, in John 16, he gave us a heads up. He says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus says, listen, you're going to face difficulties in life, and I want to tell you ahead of time. Why would he do that? So that when we face difficulties, our faith won't collapse. I'm telling you right now, in life, you will face hardships. You will have difficult days. Things will come up out of nowhere that will discourage you and fill you with fear and doubt. But I want to remind you of something. Take heart. Be encouraged. Don't let your faith fail, for I have overcome the world. Jesus uses this powerful imagery around the table in what we refer to as the Last Supper or the Lord's Supper, and he's telling us things and telling the disciples what is getting ready to happen. And Paul actually did this throughout his writings in the New Testament, just like Jesus told his disciples what it was going to be like when they saw him crucified. Paul would give a heads up to the churches that he was loving on and ministering to and pastoring. It's a word that's true for us today. In Romans chapter 8, verse 35, here's what Paul says. Can anything separate us from the love of Christ? Can trouble, suffering, and hard times, or hunger and nakedness, or danger and death? It was a rhetorical question that Paul was asking. When you face difficulties and trials and have insecurities and uncertainties, can any of that actually separate you from Christ? It was a rhetorical question that had an obvious answer, no. But this was Paul's way of putting it on our radar, of giving us a heads up ahead of time. He says, I know in life you're going to face uncertainties. I know you're going to have fears. I know you're going to have doubts. And I want to tell you ahead of time so that it doesn't derail your faith, so that it doesn't cause you to stumble, so that you won't question God even during the process. Jesus did it with his disciples, the last meal that he ever enjoyed with them. And Paul would tell the churches that he was ministering to, take heart, Jesus says, for I have overcome the world. As Paul explained there in Romans, trouble, suffering, hard times, hunger, nakedness, danger, or death, like you will face times where you'll struggle with all of those things, where all of them will be on your radar about who's going to provide for my needs and what am I going to do? And as I read verses like this, I think, wow, what a prevalent verse for us today. As we face so many fears and uncertainties in this season. During this virus, I mean, people have questioned everything. People don't know where their peace is going to come from. They don't know what's going to happen next. There's so much uncertainty and will we have enough food and will I have a job and the grief that's associated with losing a job or even losing a loved one to an illness and a virus like we're seeing that has shut the world down. Those words of Jesus ring so true today. Take heart, for I have overcome the world. It's with the same boldness that Jesus is speaking here to his disciples that his body would be broken and his blood would be spilt. But he said, take heart. Because even in the midst of all of the things that these disciples would see over the next few days, Jesus' body being broken and his blood being spilled, despite what you and I have seen over the past few months, the uncertainty, the fear, Jesus' words ring true. But take heart, for I have overcome the world. How in the world are we supposed to look at the idea of communion and attach it to the word celebrate? I mean, how were the disciples supposed to respond when Jesus is giving gruesome details about how his body would be broken and his blood would be shed for the forgiveness of the sins for you and for me? And how are we supposed to respond today when we face so many uncertainties, when there is fear, real fear in our lives? When discouragement seems to be piling up day after day after day after day, more bad news. How are we supposed to respond? What do we go back to? I love what Paul says. He gives us our response in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. He's just real with the church. He's just honest, and it's true for us today. He says, but we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do, who have no hope. See, Paul makes it very clear, as Christians, we're going to grieve. Specifically, he's saying, I don't want you to grieve about people that have died, that know Jesus. He wants to be really honest with them about their salvation and about the hope that they can have. But the premise of the verse is, Paul says, I don't want you to grieve about certain things. I know you're going to grieve, but here's the key. Followers of Jesus grieve differently. I know there's these sayings that are going around in the church and by Christians today during this season of Corona. It's phrases like, hey, I'm going to choose faith over fear. Sounds really good. But I believe that you can be a person of great faith and still be completely human. I believe that Paul says here in 1 Thessalonians 4 that you can be fearful. You can find yourself in a state of discouragement, you can grieve. Whether it's grief over a lost job or grief over a loved one or grief over missed opportunities or fears in everyday life, I think you can still be a man or a woman of great faith and still feel fear. We're human after all. But the difference that Paul says is we do not feel fear like everyone else. We don't grieve like everyone else. We don't process discouragement like everyone else. See, we grieve with hope. We feel the weight of this moment as Christians, but we have an outlook on the future that is filled with hope. We struggle just like everyone else with the present, but we have a very different outlook on the future. Why? Because we know that despite whatever happens, that God is still in control, God still has a plan, and He's still on His throne. And as Jesus sat around that table with His disciples, the reason why I think He was able to give them details of what they would see without them completely falling apart and completely losing faith was because I can tell you this because I know that God is still on the throne, that God still has a plan, that there's still a purpose. And even though you're getting ready to see the things that you're going to see, when Jesus gives His life, an innocent man on the cross for the sins of the world, it is not a reason to lose hope. It is not a reason to lose your faith. Jesus told us many things will happen in your life. You will face many difficulties and many trials, but you don't have to worry. Take heart, for I have overcome the world. Paul says we will grieve, but we do not grieve as those who do not have hope. That is the only statement that allows us to look at the loss of an innocent man's life and look at it and say, that brought the world so much hope. Because of this travesty, because of this hardship, because of this discouraging and overwhelming event, it is because of what Jesus did for you and for me. That is the reason we have any hope today. So we are going to celebrate Jesus' death. We're going to look at a body being broken and blood being spilt. But we don't look at the death of an innocent man and grieve as if those who grieve with no hope. Because we know that all along it was God's plan, that God had a purpose, and God still is on His throne. As we take communion together in a few minutes, I don't know what elements you may have in your home. Maybe it's bread, maybe it's a cracker, maybe it's grapefruit juice or Coke, I don't know, whatever, water, whatever. The power in what we're getting ready to do together does not lie in the elements that you have. There's not like a Jesus-approved cracker that you can open up right now, and it doesn't count if you don't have the right crackers. The meaning is in what we're celebrating. That the body that was broken as a term of forgiveness for you and for me. That the blood that was shed outlined a path to salvation that we could have through Jesus. And that's why we're going to read an image of a teacher with his students sitting around the table, giving a graphic explanation of how the loss of an innocent man's life will bring hope for generations to come. God, as we prepare, both in our minds and in our hearts, to celebrate communion, God, give us the right perspective. Prepare our hearts to receive this in a way, even though we're in our homes, sitting on our couches, maybe eating non-traditional communion items. God, the power is not in what we are doing right now, but in what you did on that cross for our sins, the giving of the life of an innocent man for the salvation of the world. God, help us to understand that and to process the sacrifice this morning that you gave for us. I pray and I ask those things in Jesus' name. Amen.
You were a lover before time's beginning. You gave your love freely, withholding nothing. Jesus, my Jesus, you carried the weight of the world on your shoulders. You stopped at nothing to prove you were for us. Jesus, my Jesus. It's extravagant. It doesn't make sense. We'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable. Only heaven knows just how far you'd go to say you love us, to say you love us, to say you love us. It's extravagant. It doesn't make sense. We'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable. Only heaven knows just how far you'd go to say you love us.
This is one of my favorite things that we get to do as a faith family. It's a time where followers of Jesus get to hit pause in our busy lives and just remember. Remember is the word that Jesus used when he told us this story. Every time you do this in remembrance of me. Not in hurried fashion, not just doing something without thinking about it, but actually taking a moment and reading the words and thinking about what Jesus did for you and for me on the cross. Two different images and explanations that Jesus told a few days before he was actually crucified with his followers in that upper room at the Last Supper. Here's the first words that he says from Matthew. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." It's not an accident that Jesus would use graphic words like "my body would be broken." Broken, such a harsh word, not carefully bent or not orderly put together or taken apart, but violently broken. And what's even more remarkable is that Jesus would not just offer his life up as an innocent man, but that he would do that for you and for me, for the salvation of generations to come, the only hope that we would have. Jesus was able to say, "Have hope, take heart, for I have overcome the world," because he knew that one day his body would be broken and that would pave the way for the forgiveness of the sins of you and me. So as you take that, remember, this body was broken for you.